Lily didn't make it to the bathroom in time. 3 girls were already waiting. They locked the door, pulled out clippers, and held her down on the cold tile floor while they shaved her head. They filmed everything, posted it online before she even got home. When her father saw what they'd done to his daughter, he made one phone call. By sunrise, 300 Hells Angels rolled into that Arizona town. What happened in the next 24 hours didn't just shock the school. It changed how an entire community saw justice. Before we continue, please subscribe to this channel and let us know in the comments where you are watching from. Enjoy the story. It happened after volleyball practice. The kind of late afternoon when the halls go quiet and the air feels heavy with the smell of sweat and disinfectant. Lily stayed behind to change, unhurried, routine, unaware that routine was exactly what they were counting on. She believed she was alone. She wasn't. They had planned this. Not impulsive. Not a moment of cruelty that got out of hand. Weeks of whispers, glances, messages sent after midnight. They watched her habits, waited for the right day, the right silence. They waited until the coach's footsteps faded down the hallway, until the door closed, until there was no adult left to hear what was about to happen. One of them locked the locker room door. The sound was small, almost polite. Another reached into her backpack and pulled out a pair of clippers, the hum already alive before Lily could process what she was seeing. The third girl raised her phone, camera pointed, finger steady. This wasn't just about hurting her. It was about preserving it. Proof. Entertainment. Control. Lily laughed at first. Nervous. Confused. She asked what they were doing. She told them to stop. The words came out thin. The answer was laughter. Loud, careless, rehearsed. The clippers turned on fully, the buzzing filling the room, bouncing off tile and metal lockers, drowning out reason. They grabbed her. This is the moment people like to imagine differently. They picture shouting, fighting back, some cinematic resistance. The truth is smaller and worse. Shock locks the body. Fear compresses time. Lily froze. Her arms pinned, her head forced forward. The vibration of the clippers pressed against her scalp before her brain could catch up to the reality of it. Hair fell in uneven clumps. Dark strands slid down her shoulders, hit the floor, scattered across the tiles. Each pass of the clippers stripped away something personal, something chosen, something that belonged only to her. They laughed harder with every inch gone. One of them narrated what she was doing, turning cruelty into a performance. The phone kept recording. Lily cried. Not loud. Muffled. The kind of crying that comes when screaming feels useless. She begged them to stop. She promised anything they wanted. The words didn't matter. This wasn't about negotiation. This was about power. The girl holding the phone adjusted the angle, making sure Lily's face was in frame. Tears. Panic. Humiliation. She checked the screen, satisfied. A finger tapped the upload button. The progress bar began to move. That was the moment Lily understood this wouldn't end when they walked away. The violence wasn't confined to the room. It was about to spread. Hallways. Group chats. Screens she would never see. People she had never spoken to. The internet doesn't forget, and they knew that. When they were done, they stepped back. The clippers clicked off. Silence rushed in, thick and ringing. Hair covered the floor like evidence no one would collect. They unlocked the door and left as casually as they had entered, already talking about who they were sending the video to first. Lily stayed where she was. She didn't recognize the person in the mirror. Jagged patches of scalp stared back at her. Her hands shook when she touched her head, fingers brushing skin that should never have been exposed. Rage came later. At first there was only emptiness, the kind that swallows sound. People often ask why victims don't fight harder, why they don't run, why they don't scream. They ask because they don't understand what it feels like to have your body turned into an object while you're still inside it. What it feels like to realize someone else has decided who you are going to be when this is over. This wasn't a prank. It wasn't drama. It was an assault designed to humiliate, documented to last forever. And it happened in a place that was supposed to be safe. If this makes your blood boil, you're not alone. Comment "No more bullies" if you believe no child should ever go through this. Because what happens next proves that sometimes justice doesn't come from the system. It comes from the people who refuse to stay silent. Lily's hands shook so badly, she almost crashed her bike twice on the way home. The handlebars felt slippery, like they didn't belong to her anymore. Every movement took effort. Every breath felt loud. She pulled her hoodie tighter, yanking the hood forward until the fabric pressed painfully against her forehead. It didn't hide the damage, not really, but it felt like armor. Thin, useless armor. The street stretched out in front of her, familiar and suddenly hostile. Each car that passed felt like exposure. Engines hummed. Tires hissed against asphalt. She kept her head down, eyes locked on the road, convinced that everyone could see what had been done to her. That they already knew. That they were already laughing. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Once. Twice. Again. She didn't want to look. She already knew. The video hadn't waited. It never does. While she was still sitting on the locker room floor, hair clinging to her clothes, the upload bar had finished its slow, merciless crawl. Now it was free, moving faster than she could pedal, faster than she could think. She glanced at the screen for half a second and regretted it immediately. Notifications stacked on top of each other. Names she recognized. Names she didn't. Group chats lighting up. Screenshots. Reposts. Laughing emojis. Crying laughing emojis. Fire emojis. Words that blurred together into noise, all saying the same thing without saying it directly. This is who you are now. She shoved the phone back into her pocket, heart pounding so hard it made her dizzy. The bike wobbled beneath her, tires drifting too close to the curb. She corrected, barely. Her legs felt weak, like they might give out at any moment. She kept pedaling anyway. Stopping felt worse. The houses grew more familiar as she got closer to home. Mailboxes she'd passed 1,000 times. Lawns she'd helped rake in the fall. Nothing looked different. Everything felt wrong. The normalcy of it all made her chest tighten. The world hadn't slowed down for her. It hadn't noticed. It never does. Another buzz. Then another. She could feel the vibration through the fabric of her hoodie, through her ribs, straight into her spine. Each one felt like confirmation. This wasn't contained. It wasn't small. It wasn't going away overnight. By the time she turned onto her street, she knew it was everywhere. Half the school had already seen it. By morning, it would be more. She imagined walking into class the next day. The whispers. The looks that lingered a second too long. The phones held just a little too low, screens glowing. Teachers pretending not to notice. Friends not knowing what to say. Strangers feeling entitled to her humiliation because it had been delivered to them through a screen. Her throat tightened. Breathing became something she had to remember to do. She slowed as she reached her driveway, feet scraping against the pavement as she came to a stop. The house stood there quietly, unchanged. Porch light off. Curtains drawn. Safe, in the way places are supposed to be. She stared at the front door, frozen, one foot still on the bike. Inside was her father. That thought scared her more than the ride home. More than the comments. More than the video itself. Not because she thought he would be angry at her, but because she didn't know how to explain this. How do you say what was taken from you in a single afternoon? How do you look someone who loves you in the eye when you feel ruined? She imagined his face when he saw her. The questions he would ask. The silence that might follow. Shame crawled up her spine, heavy and suffocating. She wondered if he would see her differently. If this would change everything between them. The phone buzzed again. She didn't check it this time. She leaned the bike against the garage wall and stood there, gripping the straps of her backpack, hood still pulled tight. The quiet of the neighborhood pressed in around her, deceptively calm. No sirens. No shouting. No sign of the chaos already spreading beyond her control. Lily took one step toward the door and stopped. She didn't know it yet, but her father wasn't like other fathers. And what he was about to do would make national news. Iron Jack was in the driveway when she walked up. The late-day sun caught the chrome of his Harley as he polished it slowly, methodically, the way he did everything. 30 years in the club had taught him patience. Control. The value of not reacting until you understood exactly what you were dealing with. He'd seen bar fights explode over nothing. Road wars sparked by pride. Men shattered by life and rebuilt by brotherhood. Violence never surprised him. Pain never shocked him. But when Lily stopped at the edge of the driveway, he sensed something before he even looked up. She stood too still. Her shoulders were drawn inward. The hoodie was pulled tight, unnaturally tight, as if she were trying to disappear inside it. Iron Jack straightened, rag still in his hand, and called her name. She didn't answer. She just reached up and slowly pulled the hood back. The shaved patches were uneven. Angry. Fresh. His eyes moved from her scalp to her face, pale and hollowed out, then down to her arms. Bruises. Finger-shaped. Darkening already. That was when something colder than anger settled into his chest. Not rage. Rage burns hot and fast. This was heavier. Quieter. It was the kind of feeling that locks everything else out. The kind that sharpens focus until the world narrows to a single point. He didn't raise his voice, didn't swear, didn't throw the rag or slam his fist into the bike. He didn't ask who did it. Not yet. He stepped forward, gently took her backpack from her shoulders, and set it down. He placed a hand on her back and guided her toward the house. Inside the kitchen, he poured her a glass of water and set it in front of her. His movements were steady, deliberate. Lily sat at the table, staring straight ahead, hands folded in her lap, like she was afraid they might start shaking again if she let them go. "Drink," he said quietly. She did. Iron Jack sat across from her and listened. He didn't interrupt. Not once. He didn't react when she talked about the locker room, about the Clippers, about the phone, about the laughter. His face didn't change when she told him the video was already spreading, that half the school had seen it before she made it home. Inside, something was being forged. When she finished, there was silence. Long, dense. The kind of silence that carries weight. Lily waited for questions. For anger. For heartbreak. For something. Instead, her father stood up. He picked up his phone. Just one call. The man on the other end was named Reaper. Chapter President. A voice Iron Jack trusted without hesitation. When the line connected, Iron Jack didn't explain. He didn't rant. He didn't need to. He said 7 words. "They hurt my daughter. I need the brothers." There was a pause. Not doubt. Not confusion. Recognition. On the other end, Reaper exhaled once and said, "We ride at dawn." The call ended. Iron Jack set the phone down on the counter, his calloused hand lingering for a moment before pulling away. That was all it took. No group meeting. No debate. No vote. Because this wasn't about vengeance. This wasn't about ego or territory or settling scores. This was about accountability. That night, messages moved faster than the video ever could. Across Arizona, into New Mexico, Nevada, California, phones lit up in dark rooms and roadside motels. Men read the same words and understood exactly what they meant. A kid had been hurt. The system would hesitate. Paperwork would pile up. Excuses would be made. The brothers would not wait. Lily sat at the kitchen table while her father moved quietly around the house, preparing without drama. She didn't fully understand what was happening yet, only that something had shifted, that the weight she'd been carrying alone was no longer hers to hold by herself. Iron Jack checked the time. Outside, the sky deepened, stars beginning to break through the dark. Somewhere out there, engines were already being warmed. Routes planned, miles measured in hours instead of excuses. If you believe parents have the right to protect their kids when schools fail them, hit that subscribe button. Because what you're about to hear is what happens when a community decides enough is enough. Trolls won't like this story, but if you stand for justice, you belong here. By 5 in the morning, the first bikes were already rolling. The Hells Angels don't move without reason, and they don't move without structure. What happened after Iron Jack made that call wasn't chaos, and it wasn't emotion running loose. It was procedure, ritual, a system refined over decades of discipline and trust. By midnight, the message had reached everyone it needed to reach. Not rumors, not speculation, clear instructions, a place, a time, a purpose. 300 men knew exactly where they were supposed to be and when. No speeches were necessary, no explanations required. They understood what this was about. Some were already on the road within minutes. Others packed quietly, checking bikes, calling in favors, adjusting routes. Engines turned over in driveways and garages across the Southwest. Tucson, Flagstaff, Albuquerque, Las Vegas. Men rode 4 hours through open desert, wind cutting through leather, headlights carving thin lines through the dark. No music, no chatter, just the steady pull of miles closing in. They didn't come angry. That's what surprises people. There was no yelling, no bravado, no hunger for violence. This wasn't about throwing punches. It was about presence, about making sure no one could pretend they didn't know what had happened, about standing where they could not be ignored. At gas stations along the highways, bikes rolled in one by one. Men fueled up in silence. Nods exchanged. Brief words spoken low. The kind of communication that doesn't waste breath. Each stop added more riders to the line. The convoy growing longer, heavier, impossible to miss. Leather jackets bore patches worn thin by time and road. Symbols earned, not bought. These weren't costumes. They were history stitched into fabric. Brotherhood made visible. a wall forming piece by piece. The night stretched on, but no one complained. Fatigue didn't matter. Comfort didn't matter. What mattered was showing up together. Unified, deliberate, unmistakable. This was not a threat. Not in the way people expect. No weapons were drawn. No property was damaged. The power came from restraint. From numbers. From the understanding that when 300 men choose to stand in one place, the ground shifts whether anyone wants it to or not. They weren't there for Lily alone. They were there for what she represented. A line crossed. A child humiliated and discarded by a system that moves too slowly and speaks too softly when it matters most. This was a response to silence. As the sky began to lighten, the desert took on a pale blue hue. Dawn crept in without ceremony. Headlights clicked off one by one as the sun rose. The convoy slowed, stopped, arrived. They positioned themselves with intention, not blocking roads, not causing panic, simply present. Leather and steel and human weight occupying space that demanded acknowledgement. A message delivered without a single word spoken. You will not ignore this child. That message didn't stay contained to the roadside. Word spreads when something this unusual happens. Phones come out. Calls are made. Questions start being asked. And just as the video had traveled without Lily's consent, this moment began to travel too. Remember those 3 girls? The ones who filmed it? By sunrise, their parents would be getting phone calls too. Not threats. Not demands. Conversations. Calm. Direct. Impossible to dismiss. Because it's one thing to brush off a complaint. It's another to realize an entire community is watching how you respond. This wasn't the end. It wasn't even the confrontation yet. It was the opening statement. A declaration made in daylight, in full view, with nothing to hide. 300 men didn't ride through the night for spectacle. They came to be seen, to stand still, to make it clear that what happened in that locker room mattered. And now, everyone involved was awake. The morning air was still cool when the first line of motorcycles turned onto Maple Street. No sirens, no shouting, just the low, controlled sound of engines moving with intention. Then another line followed. Then another. 2 by 2. Perfect spacing. Like a funeral procession, slow and deliberate, carrying something heavy that didn't need to be explained. They didn't speed. They didn't rev. They didn't announce themselves. They rolled in as if they had all agreed that noise wasn't necessary. Presence was enough. Neighbors noticed first. Curtains shifted. Front doors cracked open. Coffee cups froze mid-lift as people stepped onto porches, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Parents driving their kids to school slowed to a crawl. Some pulled over completely, eyes fixed ahead, unsure whether to turn around or keep going. The line kept coming. Motorcycles filled the street in a way Maple Street had never seen. Chrome caught the early light. Leather absorbed it. Faces were set, unreadable, calm. These were not men looking for attention. They were men who expected to be noticed. By the time the last bike rolled in, the engines went quiet almost in unison. One after another, silence settled over the street, thick and uneasy. 300 members of the Hells Angels dismounted and took their positions. They didn't block the entrance to the school. They didn't chain gates or surround the building. They simply stood there, arms crossed, back straight, eyes forward, waiting. Students arriving for the day slowed when they saw them. Some stopped entirely, backpacks slung halfway off their shoulders. Conversations died mid-sentence. Phones came out instinctively, then hesitated, unsure if filming felt safe or smart. A few parents instinctively stepped closer to their kids, placing hands on shoulders, shielding without knowing exactly why. Fear and awe mixed in the same breath. No one had to explain what this meant. When 300 men in leather cuts show up outside a high school, you pay attention. You ask questions. You stop pretending problems will solve themselves if you ignore them long enough. Inside the building, the day was supposed to be starting like any other. Bells, announcements, routine. But outside, reality had already rewritten the schedule. Someone was already calling the police. The principal didn't even know yet. Word traveled fast, faster than official channels ever do. Teachers whispered in hallways. Office staff stared out front windows. Security guards shifted their weight, unsure of protocol for a situation no handbook had prepared them for. The men outside didn't move. They didn't shout demands, didn't chant slogans, didn't threaten a single person. Their restraint was the message. Their stillness did the talking. This wasn't intimidation through aggression. It was intimidation through certainty. They are here. They are staying. And they are not invisible. Cars continued to arrive, each one slowing, each driver processing the same question. Why? The answer hovered in the air, unspoken but understood. Something had gone wrong here. Something serious enough to pull 300 men out of their lives and place them right here, right now. Parents exchanged looks. Some turned their cars around. Others parked and walked their kids in, eyes darting between the bikers and the school doors. The contrast was impossible to ignore. A place meant to protect children now stood under the quiet watch of outsiders who believed it had failed. If you think this is what real accountability looks like, comment, "I stand for justice." Because what the school does next will show you exactly why these men had to show up in the first place. The principal finally stepped outside, phone pressed tight to his ear, scanning the scene like he was hoping it might dissolve if he stared long enough. It didn't. The line of motorcycles remained. The men remained. The silence remained. They were not there to negotiate yet, not there to escalate. They were there to make sure this moment could not be brushed aside, buried in paperwork, or reduced to a meeting scheduled weeks too late. This was the pause before the reckoning. And everyone could feel it. At first, the principal tried to downplay it. He stood behind his desk with the practiced calm of someone used to smoothing things over. He called it a student conflict, said the school was looking into it, used words designed to slow momentum, to buy time, to shrink what had happened into something manageable. Then Iron Jack walked through the front door. Lily was beside him, a beanie pulled low over her head, hands tucked into the sleeves of her hoodie. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. The bruises on her arms were still visible, dark against pale skin. Real, undeniable. Iron Jack placed a folder on the principal's desk and opened it without asking. Inside was a printed copy of the video. Still frames, timestamps, text messages, evidence laid out cleanly, methodically, not emotional, factual. And outside, 300 members of the Hells Angels stood exactly where they had been standing since dawn. The principal's tone changed fast. The words student conflict disappeared. His posture shifted. His voice lowered. He asked questions now, careful ones. He glanced toward the window more than once, as if hoping the men outside might have vanished while he wasn't looking. They hadn't. What the school didn't know yet was that this wasn't the beginning. It was the breaking point. Lily had tried to report the girls 2 months earlier. She'd gone to her guidance counselor with screenshots, messages sent late at night, threats dressed up as jokes, warnings that something was coming. The counselor listened, nodded sympathetically, and told her to ignore it. Said escalating would only make things worse. Advised her to stay quiet. When it happened again, Lily told a teacher, a different adult, someone she thought might take it seriously. The response was a shrug and a smile that didn't reach the eyes. Girls will be girls. That sentence stayed with her. So when the locker room door locked and the Clippers came out, Lily didn't even think about reporting it. She already knew how that story ended. Paperwork, delays, gentle warnings, nothing that actually stopped anything. Until her father made them care. Inside the school, the atmosphere shifted from inconvenience to alarm. Teachers were quietly instructed to start asking questions. Students were pulled aside between classes. The same question asked again and again in low voices. Do you know anything about the video? Word spread fast, faster than the administration expected. Whispers filled hallways. Eyes darted. Phones were checked and hidden. The silence around the incident began to crack. Within an hour, one of the 3 girls broke. Not dramatically, not in tears, just enough fear creeping in to outweigh confidence. She admitted parts of it, tried to minimize, tried to frame it as a joke that went too far. Then another cracked. By mid-morning, all 3 were sitting in the office. Separated, quiet, the bravado gone. The laughter from the locker room nowhere to be found. The video played on a monitor, paused on frames that couldn't be argued away. Bruises photographed. Messages verified. Denial wasn't an option anymore. The administration moved quickly now. Meetings canceled. Calls made. Policies referenced. Everything that had moved too slowly before suddenly found urgency. Outside, nothing changed. The bike stayed parked. The men stayed standing. Arms crossed. Faces unreadable. No chanting. No threats. Just pressure, constant and undeniable, reminding everyone inside that this couldn't be buried. Students noticed. Teachers noticed. The entire town noticed. This wasn't how schools like to handle problems. Quietly. Internally, this was exposure. This was accountability knocking at the door and refusing to leave. Lily sat in a chair outside the office, her father beside her. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. For the first time since the locker room, the weight had shifted. The room felt different. People spoke to her differently. Carefully. Respectfully. For the first time, the system was listening. Not because it wanted to. Because it had to. And outside, 300 men still hadn't moved. The three girls were brought into the principal's office one by one. Without their phones. Without their audience. Without the laughter that had carried them through the locker room like armor. Their parents were called and arrived in varying states of confusion and alarm, ushered down hallways that suddenly felt much longer than they had that morning. For the first time, the girls weren't smiling. One of them started crying almost immediately. Loud, gasping sobs. She said it was just a joke, that they didn't mean for it to get so out of hand, that Lily was supposed to laugh too. The words sounded hollow even as she said them. Another girl didn't cry. She panicked. As the video was mentioned, she reached for her phone instinctively and tried to delete it right there in the office. Her thumb moved fast, desperate. It didn't work. The principal stepped forward and took the phone from her hands before she could finish. The screen froze on a frame she would never be able to undo. The third girl said nothing. She sat stiffly in her chair, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the floor. No apology. No excuse. Just silence. The kind that comes when someone realizes there's nowhere left to hide. The video played. No commentary. No spin. Just proof. The clippers. The laughter. Lily's face. The bruises on Lily's arms matched what was on screen, and then matched what was visible in real life. Evidence stacked on evidence until denial became impossible. And outside, 300 members of the Hells Angels made sure no one could lie their way out of it. The walls felt thinner knowing they were there. The weight of that presence pressed inward, steady and unyielding. No one inside the office said it out loud, but everyone understood the same thing. This wasn't going away quietly. That's when the turn came. The assistant principal cleared his throat and began talking about alternatives. About nuance. About not ruining young lives over a single incident. He used the phrase restorative justice. Suggested a mediated meeting. A conversation. An apology. A handshake. Then everyone could move forward. The room went still. Iron Jack didn't raise his voice. He didn't interrupt. He waited until the assistant principal finished, then stood up slowly. He looked directly at him and said, evenly, without heat, "You have 300 men outside who disagree." That was it. No threats. No profanity. No explanation. He turned and walked out. The message landed harder than shouting ever could. The idea that this could be smoothed over evaporated in that moment. The illusion of control the school had been clinging to shattered. Within minutes, phones were ringing again. Not parents this time. District offices. Legal counsel. Board members pulled out of other meetings and told to come in immediately. What had been treated as an internal issue less than an hour earlier was now a crisis. By late morning, the school board was holding an emergency meeting. The girls were no longer being discussed as a discipline problem. They were being discussed as a liability. Lily wasn't asked to shake hands. She wasn't asked to sit in a room with the people who had hurt her and pretend closure could be manufactured on demand. The tone had changed completely. Fear had replaced convenience. Outside, the bikers hadn't moved. Not an inch. They didn't celebrate. They didn't react. They simply stayed, as they had from the beginning, ensuring that pressure never let up. Parents whispered in hallways. Teachers avoided eye contact. Administrators spoke in hushed voices behind closed doors. The building felt like it was holding its breath. If you believe schools should protect victims, not enable bullies, comment, no more excuses. Because what happens next is exactly why these bikers refused to leave until justice was served. Then the sound of sirens cut through the tension. Police cars pulled up to the curb. The police didn't come to clear out the bikers. That much became obvious almost immediately. Their posture wasn't confrontational. Their tone wasn't urgent. They weren't scanning the line of motorcycles or counting heads. They walked past the men outside and straight into the building, because this time, someone had finally handed them something the system respects. Evidence. The video. The messages. The screenshots. The medical photos documenting the bruises on Lily's arms. For the first time since this started, the story wasn't being told through rumor or outrage. It was being told through facts. Officers sat with Lily in a quiet room, and took her statement carefully. No rushing. No minimizing. They asked her to walk through what happened, start to finish. They listened. They took notes. They looked at the evidence themselves. And when they did, there was no debate about what it was. Under Arizona law, assault is assault. Age doesn't erase it. Planning doesn't soften it. Holding someone down and harming them is still a crime. And filming it, then sharing it, crosses another line entirely. Distribution of harmful material involving a minor isn't a school issue. It's a criminal one. That distinction mattered. Phones were collected, bagged, logged. Parents watched as devices were taken from their daughters' hands, the reality of consequences settling in with each click of a sealed evidence bag. Arguments broke out in hushed tones. Some parents protested. Some demanded explanations. Some stared straight ahead, stunned. The officers didn't argue back. They didn't need to. By midday, the decision came down. All 3 girls were suspended pending a criminal investigation. Not suggested. Not negotiated. Suspended. Their parents were advised to contact attorneys. Formal language replaced comforting phrases. The shift was unmistakable. The video that had spread so easily hours earlier was now being hunted down just as aggressively. Reports filed. Platforms notified. Accounts traced. What had felt unstoppable the night before was suddenly fragile. Clips vanished. Links broke. Notifications stopped. For Lily, it was the first real exhale she'd taken since the locker room. Relief didn't come as joy. It came as quiet validation. The confirmation that she hadn't imagined it. That it really was a serious. Suspension is temporary. Investigations take time. Statements disappear into files. Iron Jack had lived long enough to know that paperwork alone doesn't heal humiliation. Consequences behind closed doors don't repair public harm. He wanted something else. Something Lily had never been given. Acknowledgement. Inside the building, administrators moved with a new urgency, but also with caution. They understood now that compliance wasn't optional. That optics mattered. That this situation would not fade quietly into policy language. Iron Jack stood in the hallway, listening as officials spoke around him, not to him. He didn't interrupt. He didn't push. He waited until there was a pause, then made himself clear. Suspension wasn't enough. An investigation wasn't enough. The harm had been public. The apology needed to be public too. Today, that request landed differently than the earlier demands. This wasn't about punishment. It was about recognition. About forcing the school to say, out loud, that Lily had been failed. That what happened to her was wrong. That silence had played a role. Administrators hesitated. They talked about policy, about liability, about process. Iron Jack didn't argue. He didn't need to. Outside, the men remained. Not angry, not restless, just present, patient, unmoving. The message was clear without being spoken. This doesn't end until it's done right. For the first time, the school had no room to delay. And the bikers still didn't leave. The room was full in a way it rarely was. Students, teachers, parents packed together, filling every seat, lining the walls, standing in the aisles. There was no chatter, no restless energy, just a low, expectant quiet that settled when the principal stepped forward. He held a sheet of paper in his hands. Not a polished statement, not something rehearsed into neutrality. His fingers trembled slightly as he unfolded it, took a breath, and began to read. He didn't start by defending the school. He started by naming the failure. He said Lily's name out loud, said it clearly, said it without qualification. He admitted the school had failed her. Not once, twice. He acknowledged that she had come forward, that she had reported what was happening, that adults had heard her and chosen convenience over protection. He admitted they had ignored warning signs, that they had minimized threats, that they had dismissed cruelty as conflict. He admitted they had prioritized the school's reputation over a student's safety. The words hung heavy in the air. This wasn't damage control. There was no attempt to spread blame or soften responsibility. He didn't hide behind policy language. He didn't say mistakes were made. He said they were wrong. Then he turned toward Lily. She stood beside her father, beanie still pulled low, hands at her sides, back straight. Iron Jack rested one hand lightly on her shoulder, steady, grounding. Lily didn't look at the crowd. She didn't look at the principal. She stared forward, expression calm, composed, controlled. The principal apologized to her directly. Not to the room. Not to the parents. To her. He said the school should have protected her. He said they should have acted sooner. He said she deserved better. And he said, plainly, that the responsibility for what happened did not belong to her. Lily didn't smile. She didn't cry. She didn't nod eagerly or bow her head. She gave a small, measured nod. That was all. Because the apology wasn't something to celebrate. It was something that should have come without pressure, without motorcycles, without headlines. But it hadn't. For the first time, someone in authority had said the words she needed to hear. We were wrong, and we will do better. Then something unexpected happened. A single clap broke the silence. Then another. Slow at first. Uncertain. Someone testing whether it was appropriate. Then the sound spread. Louder. Steadier. It wasn't directed at the principal. It wasn't approval of the school. It was for Lily. Students stood. Some hesitantly. Some immediately. The applause grew, filling the room, carrying something raw and sincere. Teachers joined in. Parents followed. Not out of obligation. Out of recognition. Everyone there understood what it took for her to stand on that stage. What it took to walk back into a building that had failed her and face it anyway. And everyone understood why it hadn't happened until pressure made silence impossible. 300 members of the Hells Angels didn't need to be in the room to be felt. Their presence had already done its work. They had forced a reckoning that apology alone could never undo, but could finally begin to address. Lily didn't react to the applause. She stood still, grounded, dignified, not because she was unaffected, but because she had reclaimed control over how this moment would belong to her. When the clapping finally faded, the room felt different. Lighter, honest, as if something that had been buried had finally been spoken out loud. If this is the kind of justice you want to see more of in the world, smash that like button and subscribe. Because stories like this prove that when good people refuse to stay silent, systems change. Drop a comment. I stand with Lily, if you believe every child deserves to be heard. Lily stepped back with her father, disappearing into the crowd as quietly as she had arrived. But the echo of that moment stayed. By late afternoon, the shift was unmistakable. The men who had stood unmoving all day began to stir. Not with urgency, not with ceremony, just quiet coordination. One engine turned over, then another, not all at once. One by one, like a heartbeat restarting after a long pause. Reaper stepped forward first. He shook Iron Jack's hand firmly, the way men do when words aren't necessary. No speeches, no declarations, just mutual understanding. Then he turned to Lily. He looked her in the eye, steady and unflinching, and said, "You're one of us now. Anyone touches you again, they answer to 300 brothers." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Lily nodded. For the first time since this began, the tension in her shoulders eased. Not completely, not magically, but enough to breathe a little easier. Enough to believe the world had shifted back toward balance. The engines continued to start, one after another, a low rumble spreading across the parking lot. Leather creaked. Gloves were pulled on. Helmets adjusted. Still no shouting. No celebration. No victory laps. They mounted their bikes and rolled out the same way they had arrived. 2 by 2. In formation. Controlled. Silent. A line of steel and discipline slipping back into the road, leaving space behind them where pressure had once been constant. They didn't leave because they were finished with the story. They left because the job was done. The school had acted. The police were involved. Accountability had replaced avoidance. And Lily had something she hadn't walked into that locker room with. Her dignity. As the last bike disappeared down the road, the parking lot felt strangely empty. Not relieved. Not abandoned. Just quieter. Like a storm that passes without destruction but leaves everything rearranged. Lily stood beside her father and watched them go. There was no smile at first. Just stillness. Then, barely there, a small one formed. Not joy. Not triumph. Something softer. Something earned. Remember how this started? With 3 girls. A locked door. A pair of clippers. What happened to them didn't come with drama or spectacle. It came with consequences. Suspensions that turned into charges. Phones confiscated. Parents facing realities they couldn't explain away. A school forced to admit failure in front of everyone it had once tried to reassure. Their names faded from gossip quickly. The video vanished. The attention moved on. But Lily didn't disappear with it. She walked back into school differently. Not untouched. Not unchanged. But no longer invisible. Teachers spoke to her with care. Students looked at her with respect, some with quiet apology. The whispers stopped. Not because people forgot, but because the story had changed. It wasn't about what had been done to her anymore. It was about what she had survived. The men who rode in that morning didn't ask for credit. They didn't stick around for gratitude. They didn't give interviews or make statements. They returned to their lives knowing they had done what they came to do. Stand where silence had lived. The world likes to believe justice is automatic. That systems work if you wait long enough. That speaking up is always enough on its own. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it takes people willing to show up, stand still, and refuse to move until the truth is acknowledged out loud. That day ended quietly. No sirens. No chaos. Just a school forced to reckon with itself, and a girl who went home knowing she was no longer alone. The parking lot emptied. The engines faded. The street returned to normal. But nothing about what happened there would ever be forgotten. What happened to the three girls wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It didn't come with screaming headlines or viral outrage. It came with paperwork. Charges were filed quietly and methodically. Assault. Contributing to the distribution of harmful material involving a language stripped of emotion, written to hold weight in court. Age didn't erase responsibility. Planning didn't soften consequences. Two of the girls accepted plea deals. Probation. Mandatory community service. Court-ordered counseling. Restrictions placed on their digital access. Regular check-ins with the juvenile system. Consequences that followed them home, followed them to family dinners, followed them into futures that would now include official records and uncomfortable explanations. The third girl chose to fight it. She went to trial. There, the laughter from the locker room meant nothing. The silence she'd kept in the principal's office didn't protect her. The video played in full. The bruises were documented. Witness statements stacked up. Context collapsed under evidence. She was convicted. Not as a spectacle, not as a lesson for others, simply as the outcome of choices made and lines crossed. The ruling was brief. The impact was not. All three were expelled. No appeals. No transfers disguised as fresh starts. Their lockers were cleared. Their names removed from class lists. Hallways they once walked with confidence no longer belonged to them. The video, the thing they thought would give them power, became a liability overnight. Platforms complied with takedown requests. Law enforcement worked with digital forensics teams to trace reposts and issue removal demands. It didn't vanish completely. Nothing ever does. But it stopped spreading. It stopped being entertainment. Their names never appeared in headlines. They were adults, yet protected by law, shielded from public identification in a way Lily hadn't been shielded from humiliation. That irony wasn't lost on anyone paying attention. In that town, anonymity didn't mean invisibility. Everyone knew. Parents knew. Students knew. Teachers knew. The grocery store, the gas station, the sidelines at local games. Eyes lingered. Conversations paused. Reputations settled into place quietly, without anyone needing to announce them. No one forgot. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about celebrating their downfall. It was about consequence. The simple, sobering understanding that harm leaves marks on everyone involved, whether the world sees them or not. The story didn't end with redemption arcs or lessons learned neatly on screen. It ended with reality, with the knowledge that some actions permanently alter the way a community sees you. And then the question shifted. Not what happened to them, but what happened to Lily. Because punishment alone doesn't heal. Accountability doesn't undo trauma. Justice doesn't rewind time or restore what was taken. What it can do is change the direction forward. And that was the part that mattered most. The next morning, Lily walked into school wearing her beanie and a straight back. The hallway went quiet. Not the kind of silence that comes from fear. The kind that comes from understanding. Lockers stopped slamming. Conversations paused. Heads turned, then looked away, not because she was being avoided, but because no one felt entitled to her anymore. No one laughed. No one whispered. No one lifted a phone. She walked down the hall at her own pace, shoulders squared, eyes forward. Not defiant. Not fragile. Present. She stopped at her locker, spun the combination, opened it, and pulled out her books. Just another student starting her day. Except it wasn't just another day. For the first time in months, she felt safe. Not because the world had suddenly become kind, but because it had finally become accountable. Because silence had been broken. Because what happened to her had been named, confronted, and answered. She went to class. She took notes. She raised her hand once. Nothing extraordinary happened. And that was the point. She wasn't alone anymore. She had her father, who never once asked her to be smaller or quieter to make things easier. She had 300 brothers in leather who showed up without asking for permission or praise. And she had a town that finally saw her, not as a rumor, not as a video, not as a headline, but as a kid who deserved protection. Days turned into weeks. The attention faded. Routine returned. Slowly, steadily, her hair began to grow back. Uneven at first. Soft. New. But the shame never came back. Because shame only lies where silence does. Iron Jack still rides. Still polishes chrome in the driveway. Still answers calls late at night when a brother needs him. Nothing about his life changed on the surface. But he walks differently now. Carries something quieter and heavier. The knowledge that love sometimes looks like standing your ground until systems are forced to move. Lily still goes to school. Still studies. Still laughs with friends. Still has days that are hard. Trauma doesn't vanish just because justice shows up. But it loosens its grip when truth is spoken out loud. And somewhere on a highway in Arizona, 300 men know they did the right thing. Not with fists. Not with violence. But with presence. They didn't break doors down. They didn't threaten. They didn't take the law into their own hands. They stood still. They refused to leave. They made silence impossible. They reminded a school, a town, and everyone watching that protection isn't a policy. It's an action. That accountability doesn't come from statements. It comes from people willing to show up and be counted. Because sometimes justice doesn't wear a robe. Sometimes it wears leather. If this story moved you, share it. Because every kid who's ever been bullied deserves to know there are people who will stand up. There are fathers who will fight. And there are brothers who will ride 300 deep to make sure you're never ignored again. Comment, "No more silence," if you stand with victims. Subscribe if you believe in real justice. And remember this, the loudest thing you can do is refuse to look away. Dedicated to every child who was told to stay silent.